1 in 3 people will die with some sort of dementia. Women will get more dementia than men. Risk of dementia go up when the menopause starts.
Women with high fitness in midlife were 88% less likely to develop dementia. So much of it is your midlife choices. A lot of this is in your control.
How does your physical health impact your brain health as you age?
With cardiac expert Calum Gore.
That is the biggest risk reduction that you're going to ever have. An obese person getting into a normal healthy weight range. Hypertension, high cholesterol, diabetes, all are associated with increased risk. People know obesity and being overweight is bad for them, and they're walking around not doing nothing about it.
I think people know, but I don't think people necessarily know what to do. The average lifespan of an American woman is 79, which means midlife is 89. What would you say to somebody at that point?
Obviously, the earlier that you do this stuff, the better. But if you're 45, 50 years old, and you're sitting there and you're overweight, you're inactive, it's not just all over for you.
Hi, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Stacey.
And this is the Body Smart Podcast.
And we are women's weight loss experts on a mission to empower you to permanently take control of your weight and your health. And today we want to tackle some of those things that maybe you think are like future me health problems. But we have got Calum Gore with us, who's a postgraduate researcher in cardiovascular sciences. And generally, longevity is a big part of your area of interest. And we wanted to really bring home today that it's not a future me problem. A lot of these things that we're going to talk about are now you problems that we should probably be talking about more. And the big one that kicked this off is I saw a post that sent me down the rabbit hole a couple of weeks ago about dementia. And it was a study that showed that women with high fitness in midlife actually were 88% less likely to develop dementia, which I was like, that is wildly impressive. And those who did developed it so much later, so 9 years later. And I just think, obviously, we bang on about fitness all the time, but there's got to be something there with like that link between cardio fitness or, just general fitness and this hugely debilitating disease, which actually is the biggest killer of women in the UK. 7 million American women living with it.
Is that true? The biggest killer of women in the UK?
Well, it's starting to be the leading cause of death for women over 65.
Wow.
In the UK, as reported in the British Medical Journal in 2019. But it certainly is also the leading cause of death in elderly women in the USA.
Yeah.
And not just that, in terms of generalised, in general, women, people. The general population in America, worldwide actually, 1 in 3 people will die with some sort of dementia.
Wow.
Now, it might not be the cause of their death, but 1 in 3 people will have some sort of dementia upon them dying.
So what's the history of that? Like, how are we getting to that point where 1 in 3 people are...
So I think it's actually a little bit of our success in terms of we are living longer. Right, we live a lot longer than at any point in human history. In the last few hundred years, we've got to the point where the average age is 80 upon death, right? So, or 79, 80 years old, depending on where you are. When a few hundred years ago, you would not see many people at 80 years old. Yeah. You certainly probably wouldn't see many centenarians, anyone getting to 90. And the biggest risk factor for dementia is age. So you can't, and this is a non-modifiable risk factor because you can't not age. You're going to age, right? So you're going to increase. So that's the biggest risk factor.
I think that's probably why it doesn't get as much airtime as other things.
Possibly,
we're all really aware of breast cancer and heart disease, but actually, until you get into your 70s and 80s, the prevalence of dementia is fairly low. So in your 60s, it's like 3 to 5%, your 70s, 15 to 20%, but 85 plus is 30 to 50%.
Wow.
So A, it feels a very long time away, and B, a lot of people might be thinking, well, I'm probably not going to live to 85.
I guess that's the whole thing of, lifespan versus health span, isn't it? Which I think a lot of people forget about. Like, oh yeah, your life expectancy might be 80, but like, health span is how many good years you're going to have, without like disease or lack of mobility.
And this is a very good point. There's a lot of research that shows that the last 10 decades of your life, in the majority of people, are going to be full of pills, hospital visits, poor DALYs, which are disability-adjusted life years, which is how we quantify how disease is affecting people. And I think that's a very, very...
And it's a shit way to live.
It is. It's
like
not
if anyone's had grandparents or spent time around those people who are in that last decade of life, and you just watch the mobility decrease, they need to be looked after more, they need to have carers around, they're on a bunch of pills, cognitively they're just getting slower. It's you're just watching people just slowly deteriorate, and it's sad.
It's interesting that you say the mobility factor is huge. As soon as you start losing mobility, people decline very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So if you don't use your mobility, you're going to lose it, and that can start really quite early as well. I mean, people just becoming fairly inactive, and they just get more inactive. They retire, they get even more inactive, and they should be actually keeping the same.
That was
activity
so Steph
levels.
worked in a hospital, and she worked on the hip ward. They have a separate hip ward for this, and she come back and told me, and she was like, "Oh, we didn't used to operate on really elderly people who had broken their hip, who are in like the 70s and 80s, because it's such a large procedure. But now there's a 10% chance that they will die within the next month, I believe, and a 30% chance they will die in a year."
And it goes even more up when you look at the numbers for 2 years.
Yeah, so they
It's
operate
just
now.
50%.
It's wow. Yeah. So it's super high. So they operate on everyone. They're like, she was saying, we had an 88-year-old who we operated on today, who's broken their hip. But it's not the fracture it's not the breaking of the hip that kills them. It's the lack of mobility.
The decline is so...
Yeah, they're in a wheelchair for the next 6 months. They can't move. They don't build that strength back. They lose all that muscle in that time.
Yeah. So there is obviously a very strong link between all these other areas of fitness and health and mobility, but it does seem there's a specifically strong link with cardio fitness.
Cardio
health.
So we'll go through the non-modifiable risk factors. So age we know is an independent risk factor. It's gonna, your risk goes up as you get older. You've got genetics. So if you've had a parent or a grandparent that's got a form of dementia, it's going to be more, your risk is increased then. It's going to be more likely that you might get some sort of dementia. You've got ApoE4. Everyone might know what ApoE4 is because of the Chris Hemsworth documentary on National Geographic, where it showed that he had this risk, this gene, this ApoE4, which increases the risk of Alzheimer's.
Can you explain that a little bit more? So it was a documentary with Chris Hemsworth called Limitless.
Yeah.
He got the test done. And what that just shows, he's got this gene.
Yeah, so he's got this specific gene which is called ApoE4, and that has been shown to increase the risk of Alzheimer's, specifically a type of dementia. So if you have that gene, your risk is increased compared to somebody who doesn't have that gene. They might be ApoE, a different type of ApoE, maybe a different one, but that increases the risk.
But just to
quite a bit,
bring home though, it's a genetic risk factor. It doesn't mean if you've got it, you're getting it.
Yeah, it doesn't. Everyone that has got ApoE4, and this is what we was talking about earlier, is that your genes will load the gun, and your environment often triggers what goes on.
Yeah.
So your genes will load it, and your environment triggers what's going on.
And your choices and your behaviours.
Choices and your behaviours. But we'll move on to choices and behaviours in a second, because we're talking about cardiovascular. One of the independent risk factors is women will get more dementia than men, and that, obviously women live a couple of years longer than men in Western world. So I think it's about 18 months to 2 years in the UK. So that obviously will increase the risk, especially in the later years of life. That increases the risk of dementia for women. But another one is estrogen. So estrogen is neuroprotective, right? So it helps keep the synapses functions, keeps them fluid, which is really good. When you come to the menopause, we see the risk of dementia go up in women when the menopause starts. And
this is post-menopause.
This is post-menopause. Yeah. So as that estrogen basically keeps dropping down, and menopause starts, you'll see an increased risk of dementia.
And is there anything other than HRT that you can do to keep your estrogen levels in it?
Don't think so. No, I think HRT is going to be the one. And this is the interesting. So the research around this is far more nuanced. But generally speaking, most of the research has shown that there's this kind of critical window of when you start. If you start HRT when the menopause starts, you continue to have that risk that risk reduction that's offered by estrogen. So there's a critical window. But say you start the HRT at 65 years old, we actually see the risk go up in dementia. I don't know why that is. We'll have to have a look. It might be related to the fact that you've been through the menopause and it's been so many years until you've started the HRT, and that's so many years in them later in life, as your age increases and the dementia risk goes up, you've probably done a bit of damage to your cognitive health, and estrogen's not been there to give you that risk reduction. But that's an interesting one.
It's definitely an interesting one for people to consider, because there are many reasons that women take HRT. But again, this isn't potentially the forefront of somebody's mind when they're living menopause symptoms. They're thinking about what can the HRT do for that. But actually, there's these longer term potential benefits as well.
Absolutely. So I would suggest that if a woman's going through the menopause, and we know that the women's hormones are so much more complicated, not complicated, they have to live with such more bigger consequences of their hormones throughout their life. So when they get to the menopause, I think you should go to your doctor, talk about the benefits of HRT. And I do think there's more benefits in HRT than not in HRT for women.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, and this is just what I've observed across the board, is that the women that can and do take HRT, it's not that just like the benefits that we maybe see in like the studies and the papers that get released. It's also the fact that because they have more energy, because they get better sleep, they then work out more, show up better, move more, and because of that, there's all these other lifestyle interventions that they are actively doing more of because they feel better, which all play into longevity
absolutely.
too.
Absolutely.
Because if you're getting night sweats and you've got brain fog and your work's taking longer and you're highly stressed, and when you turn into food, and, and emotionally eating, and it's like a really bad negative feedback loop. But then if you have somebody that takes HRT and all them symptoms, or most of them symptoms, have gone, you get the positive feedback loop. They take the healthier actions, and they can show up better and work.
And we see you see less depression in women that take HRT.
Which is a really high risk factor for dementia, isn't it? Depression.
Depression's another risk factor for depression. But if we go to the modifiable risk factors, then what we see is cardiovascular health, which is what you wanted to lead on to. Cardiovascular health, which is one of my field, it is my main field of study, more of the genetic components to cardiovascular health. But I've been looking at cardiovascular health for the better part of 15 years throughout different education and working with clients and patients. So we know that the healthier that you are in your cardiovascular system confers a direct benefit to the risk reduction of dementia. So we also know that hypertension, high cholesterol, diabetes, all are associated with increased risk of dementia, as well as all the other terrible diseases that you can get, such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obviously. So, and even cancers, we see them, a lot of cancers are lifestyle. Like it's been caused by your lifestyle.
Like lifestyle injuries.
Yeah. I think the World Health Organization said about 70% of cancers total are lifestyle origined, right? So it's direct cause of what you're doing in your life. So this is the other one that is quite interesting, especially in dementia, is cognitive engagement. So this is another non-independent risk factor, a modifiable risk factor that you can change. So there was another study in the British Medical Journal that showed that for every year that you didn't retire, it conferred a 3% risk reduction in dementia. So that's huge. So why do we see this? Now, we're not telling everybody here to
work until you die.
I certainly will be doing that because I can see the research, and just as a person, I'm very work orientated and focused, and I enjoy it. But it's because of the cognitive engagement that people get from not retiring. So if you're going to retire, people can go to part-time work, so part-time retire. But if you're not going to work, what you should be doing is, what is it that you're doing with your time? Are you just sitting about doing nothing, taking it easy, trying to enjoy your golden years like that? Or should you be socially engaging with other people, challenging your brain still? And if you do that, it's just as good as not retiring.
Yeah.
But the danger there is that I think people get complacent. They'll go, do you know what? Oh, I'm just going to chill out today. And then it's 3 years later.
Is that a bit of a lie we've been told about, like, take it easy? Especially as people get, like, sick or old, isn't it? It's like, oh, take it easy, don't go out, you know what I mean? And it tends to be the opposite, you know what I mean? Actually,
Well, I think the research is now don't like, as you were saying, but it's the same with pregnancy as well. You know, like the older generation would have said, oh, take it easy, don't lift anything heavy, don't be running around, you should probably not be at work. And now the researchers do be running around and lifting things that are heavy. And we would say to our older clients, like, why would you not go to the gym because you're in your 70s? Go to the gym in your 70s.
Yeah.
And I think it's a bit of a shift as we've now
Absolutely.
got the science to back it up.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing, like you said, is really key of that. Like, there's no deadline. When you retire, you're like, oh, I've got all these years ahead of me. What's the rush? I'm just going to take a bit of time out and like relax. And before you know it, you've done nothing for years. But I think it's really interesting that you said it's not just about work, because there's so many other ways people can stay like mentally engaged,
Yes,
whether that's
absolutely.
volunteering or learning a new skill. Like my mum's just taken up painting randomly. She's pretty good at it, actually. But, you know, there's stuff like that maybe you would have liked to do when you were younger, you didn't have the time. You need to make a conscious point of, now I have the time, I'm going to do those things that I've always wanted to do and learn. And the other thing that we were talking about earlier was that intergenerational stimulation as well. It's not just, you know, going and doing things on your own.
Yeah. So one of the things that you've seen in Singapore is that multi-generational living, which confers direct benefits to longevity. And it goes to your point. So we see that in Singapore, they give housing benefits and financial benefits to people that will bring their parents, elderly parents and grandparents, I think, to live near them in the same neighbourhood or with them. And this, interestingly, doesn't just confer a benefit of longevity to the elderly person, it confers a benefit of fulfillment and longevity to the persons that are looking after their elderly people. And that's because of that intergenerational interactions and a bunch of other stuff as well. And I think that's quite important. I actually really like that. I'm not going, so my parents are getting old. They're not old, but they're getting old. My in-laws are getting old. I won't put them in a home. I think it's a bit of a cop-out to put them in a home and then visit them every 2 weeks and see them for an hour. I want to have them live near me or with me so they can enjoy their last years of life. And I hope that's going to be a long time. And I hope it's going to be a healthy lifespan for them as well. And I really like that kind of model that they've got in Singapore. I really do.
I think it's something that our like Western society has structured to be the complete opposite. Because, you know, we all move around for jobs and university, and we don't live near our families, let alone in the same neighbourhood or the same house. And there is no support to do that, really. It's easier to access funding to put your parent in a home. There's no real structure to say, actually, I'm going to bring them home and I need the funding to adapt my house. That isn't there. No. So I think it's really wise what you say, you know, they've done in Singapore. And obviously there is a cultural element to it as well, where
there is a
that
cultural
is
element
more
to it,
normalised to live in multi-generational families.
Yes.
But I do think that kind of stimulation of being around grandkids and just, you know, being stimulated in many different ways, not just by the TV or by a book or by a puzzle, is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's about forming, if you're not going to retire, if you are going to retire, it's about forming a habit throughout the week. Volunteer maybe 1 day a week, or, you know, learn a new skill like your mother who's painting. That's incredibly important. Like if you say, look, I've always wanted to learn the piano, just not had the time. So I'll probably learn the piano when I'm part-time retiring, because that is a very good skill that we see so much cognitive improvement. I mean, obviously, the earlier that you do this stuff, the better. But so this goes back to, sorry, I'm going to actually retract. Just like contributing to a pension, earlier that you do, the more benefits that you're going to get, right? ISA in this country, the earlier that you contribute to ISA, the more benefits that ISA is going to have in 30, 40 years. But if you have not been taking preventative actions, if you're 45, 50 years old and you're sitting there and you're overweight or obese, you're not taking no exercise, you're inactive, it's not just all over for you. You can still gain huge benefits from getting into healthy weight, getting into good activity patterns, and that will give you benefits of risk reductions on dementia, risk reductions on cardiovascular disease and other diseases that we see. So yes, there is no point, in my opinion, there's no point where you can't prevent. Even at 65, you can start the prevention journey. There's no point that you can't. It's just that the earlier you do it, the better.
Yeah. And I think what's really interesting is there was a study this year from the Lancet Commission on Dementia that I was looking at, and they broke it down into like early life risks, midlife risks, and then later life risks. And those things like social isolation, they were in the later life when you've retired.
Yeah.
But actually, so much of it is affected by your midlife choices.
Absolutely.
And that's things like high cholesterol, depression, inactivity, diabetes, smoking, alcohol, all these lifestyle choices, all of these things that we bang on about all the time, because it's not just dementia. Like, yes, they've shown in this study there's like a very significant impact on dementia by getting these things in check. But your point about longevity, if you get your cholesterol in check, if you're active, if you don't develop type 2 diabetes, if you don't drink that much, you don't smoke, your all mortality risk is going to be lower.
Yeah.
From everything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And what about cholesterol was one of the highest ones, actually.
Yeah, cholesterol. So high cholesterol has been associated with a bunch of different diseases, not just dementia. It's been associated with cardiovascular disease, strokes, heart disease, which are all part of cardiovascular diseases. So yeah, absolutely. One of the things that, so obviously we've talked about dementia, and that's important, especially for females, elderly females. However, one of my biggest gripes in the industry at the moment is that people will take a supplement or medication and not change anything out of their lives. That's what they'll think will confer the risk reduction for. Even if you take just a statin, right, to lower the cholesterol that is associated with the risk of dementia, right? Even if you do that, we know that a lot of people in the hospitals have normal amounts of cholesterol that have taken statins that are still having heart attacks. We see that. We've got huge amounts of data for that. So why is that? Because you have to get the basics right, which is what Body Smart do so well, right? So what you need to do is you need to establish good pattern of activity, and you need to eat well enough to be able to maintain a good body weight, as in your BMI. So what we know, so in terms of overall mortality, I did like a collation of 4 meta-analysis, and it all showed the same. What they shown was that if you're even slightly overweight, which is 25 to 30 on that BMI scale.
So people hate this, by the way.
I know they do.
Like the amount of times we ever talk about BMI at all, we get blasted. BMI is outdated. You don't know what you're talking about. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's talking about BMI.
Why do you think that is?
Well, you're pointing the finger at people, aren't you? And people don't like it.
And they don't like it.
Yeah, they don't like it. And especially when it's a lot more normalized, I would say, even in America. But it's 100% getting that way here. Yeah.
It is, yeah.
I had a lady
for
say,
a long time it's been like that.
She did the quiz, so she did our calorie quiz, and it gives you your weight and it gives you your calories and protein and tells you where you are on the BMI scale. And it come back and said, you are obese. And she was like, I've just taken your calorie quiz. It's wrong. I'm not obese. I'm just a little bit chubby. And, I had a conversation with her to explain, like, hey, like this wasn't like opinion. This is facts. Like that is the case. If that's your height and weight, like you will be obese. You are obese. Yeah. Which I just think is bizarre.
But it's important to know, because there needs to be some kind of objective measure for you to be able to do research.
Absolutely.
And people don't like the labels, but okay, so we can just say, right, fine, your BMI is 35. It doesn't matter what we label it. You are categorically at more risk if you fit into that label.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought this up, because this is actually quite a good talking point to go around. So I'm going to go back to BMI is an absolutely perfect measure for average people. It is perfect for that.
I can already But I'm not the average person, Calum.
Yeah, so
not me. I mean, this is what people say. Like, I'm not average. I'm more muscular than the
Okay, so I want to talk about that. So let's go through this, right? So if you're overweight on the BMI, which is 25 to 30, you will lose 1 to 2 years of your life. That's what's shown, and it's shown in big data. Like the meta-analysis in the Lancet that showed this had 900,000 participants. Right, it was huge, so we know it, right? Then, if you're obese, that's 30 to 35, just normal obesity. That was conferring a life years lost of 3 to 6 years, actually 3 to 6.5 years. And this has been repeatedly shown in 4 meta-analysis that I've read. I posted up the other day. And then, if you're morbidly obese, it's 10 years life lost.
Yeah.
Now, there's something called the obesity paradox. Now, the obesity paradox basically says, if you've got more muscle mass than fat mass and you're overweight, not obese, but overweight, this confers a protection to diseases that you might get later on in life. It confers that protection because you've got more body mass. So someone like you, Jaymie, who's I think you're about 26 on your BMI, aren't you? Is that right?
Like I think 26.1.
Yeah, 26.1. But you're absolutely more muscle mass. So I don't think you've got anything to worry about.
But
So the data does show
I did
that.
remember bringing this up with you because I've even said as I maybe get into like my late 40s or 50s, I probably would look to lose weight. I keep the muscle on, but maybe look to lose weight. And there's a couple of things, and again, this is just anecdotally. Obviously, you don't really see anyone who's morbidly obese over 70, or I haven't seen anyone like it's not like a regular thing that you see in 70-year-olds. And you do typically hear the little old lady, the little old man. It's not. You don't really typically see morbidly obese people who are in that age, but you also don't see tall people. And I'm 6'3", so my only sort of conclusion around it was just like, is that because I'm ingesting more calories, I have to take in more oxygen, air pollution, like whatever it is, but you typically don't see tall old people, or I haven't. If anyone else has,
I did check into that. So, but basically, the obesity. So with tall people, it's actually the research. I really did look at it. The research is very imbalanced.
Okay.
You do see some studies that do show that tall people have a increased overall mortality, but you also see a lot of studies that show that they don't. And it could be things like increased cardiac output because you've got more muscle mass, you're taller. It could be things like that affect it, which is what we're going to talk about. Yeah. So I think the obesity paradox does have merit, and if you've got more muscle mass and you're slightly overweight, you shouldn't worry. However, if you've got more...
How would people measure that? So I'm like, I might actually even be, maybe I can put my details in. I'm 6'3", 210. But I'm like slightly overweight, or slightly over like healthy weight. I'll let you guys answer this. Where would you, in terms of muscularity, what would you say I am? Like just a little bit muscular, moderately, very muscular, like...
I think you are.
Okay, so if you say I'm very muscular and I'm only just over 25,
you'll be okay.
If you as a woman or someone's listening and you would say, oh, I've got a bit of muscle, or I've got like, would you say you're extremely muscular? And if you are just over 25, or are you seeing like 28, 29?
We can see it in, so the next point I was going to make is going to answer that question for you. The next point is, the first thing you'd measure is by getting your body fat analysis done and doing a DEXA. I don't like DEXA just because it's exposure to unnecessary radiation. I know some people say that is not harmful, but I think the less double strand breaks that you can get in your DNA, the better, because that's what radiation does. You could do the bod pod. You can do bioimpedance as long as you do bioimpedance the same day, the same time.
What's bioimpedance? Sorry.
The scales.
The electric scales.
Right,
yeah. So they'll tell you. So it just works on conduction of electricity through the body.
26.2.
Yeah.
No.
So anyway, so that's how you'd measure that, and then you'd also do hip to waist ratio, or just even waist. Now, we've got data in bodybuilders as well. So bodybuilders take super physiological doses of anabolic hormones to create this massive amount of muscle mass. And we know that they have an increased cardiac workload. They'll have hypertension. These issues will cause cardiovascular diseases. They'll cause liver, kidney damage. I'm really sorry, but it does. I know, just like the BMI, I'm going to offend a load of bodybuilders. But if you've got a massive amount of muscle mass, it's causing you health issues, and you're choosing to look good over the benefits of look good over longevity, because you're gonna get you can see it, and you can see this even in just normal life. When you see a bodybuilder like Ronnie Coleman or whoever, they've got issues. You're going to have heart valve replacements, all sorts.
Like Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think, had a new heart, multiple different heart
Yeah,
valves.
so he's lots of different heart valves. So the thing is if you've got too much muscle mass, like what the bodybuilders do, yes, it starts to become a problem. But if you're a little bit over in the BMI, that which is not normally average for people. This is,
and also you have to work pretty hard
You do.
to get that.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
without those steroids, and as a woman, to be that level of muscular, it's pretty hard.
But I can just picture like what people are saying already, or just know it. Like, oh well, I've got genetically big legs, or I've got bigger legs than typical.
Yeah, but so have I, and my BMI is like 22.
Yeah.
Like it.
Yeah, no, of course. And I think, but that's the thing, isn't it? Is like people want to like willfully ignore something like BMI and say it's outdated and be a 27, 28, 29 and say, well, I do go to the gym 3 times a week and I do lift weights and I am fit. That's like, that's all great.
but you're still BMI is still relevant to you.
Yeah.
Science doesn't
It's
care
just one
about.
element, though, isn't it? It's like
About
your
them
your
facts.
BMI is one measure we could use for risk. But if your BMI is high, but you are active, you don't drink, you don't smoke, your cholesterol's in check, like all these other things, you're still in a better place than someone whose BMI
absolutely.
is low, but they've got those things.
Yeah. In actual fact, if you're active, you've got good activity levels, you're slightly overweight, you're going to be in a better position than someone that's slightly overweight and that is not active, right? So them lifestyle modifications, is that what you...
Well, I'm saying even somebody who say their BMI is 22, but they don't do any exercise, they drink alcohol, they smoke, their cholesterol's
If
high.
they're smoking, they're in trouble. Smoking is the worst thing that you could... I can't believe there are still people smoking. It is absolutely nuts. We've got these cigarette packs about the size of a phone. It says it'll kill you. And
And you
say,
buy
"Look,
it."
Bang. And you're actually paying them for it. It's absolute... I can't get over that people are still... And you see it in 15-year-old kids outside school that think it's still cool to
Well,
smoke
it's a vaping
cigarettes.
now, isn't it?
Or vaping,
Yeah.
and which... I mean, it is a nightmare. And smoking is... If you ask any cardiovascular scientist, right, or cardiologist, smoking is going to be the worst thing that you can do for your cardiovascular health. The absolute worst, because it's repetitive, it's every day, it's all the time over consequences. You're screwing up so much in your... I'm not going to go into the science of it because you could talk about it all day, but you're screwing up so much in your body you don't realise, and people still do it.
Smoking's definitely bad.
Yeah.
If you didn't know, I am a weight loss coach, but I've also lost over 50 pounds myself, so I do know how hard this journey can be. Jaymie and I built the Body Smart method to cut through all the BS out there and bring together the latest weight loss science to fast track your weight loss. None of the frustrating trial and error that I battled with myself. Over 4,000 women have lost 15 to 60 pounds within 6 months with us, whilst also gaining healthy habits, skills, and knowledge, which mean they'll never have to diet again. Now, we know that you have thrown hundreds, if not thousands of dollars at this before and been disappointed endless times. So at Body Smart, we are so confident that you'll get results with our method. We have a full money-back guarantee. To apply to work with one of our expert one-on-one coaches, go to bodysmartfitness.com.
Don't
Even if we
smoke.
take smoking out.
The thing is like, I really enjoy... Have you watched Mad Men?
I haven't. I've been told to watch it. It's like a very...
Mad Men's a very good program because it's about Madison Avenue, which is very famous for advertising agents.
Is it like the 50s or the 60s?
60s, yeah. Right, if you want to see how advertising was created, watch Mad Men. It is fantastic to understand kind of like how capitalism was propelled with the use of advertisement. And even then, in the 60s, we had medical research that said, oh, you know what, smoking, it's not very, very good. And you've got these guys in advertising going, how do we get around this? How do we get around this? Right? So it's just like the BMI. Right, to me, people are going like, and then people back in them days would have been like, smoking, yeah, but it's fine. Smoking's all right, and they'll be doing all this. Now people are saying BMI is not relevant to them because they're overweight and they don't like the fact that they're overweight, and they can't change it. But eventually, they're going to have to accept hopefully,
Well, they can change it.
they can.
Yeah, they can change it. Yeah.
But they can't. They need to get. I think most people need to be given the right information because there's so much misinformation out there that people are like, oh, okay, what is it? Low carbs, low calories, exercise, this, that, the other, and they're just overwhelmed. So I think getting the source of the right information and then applying that to their life will help them. But I think most people are going to feel dread about the BMI because they feel like they can't change it, but they can, like you said, they can change it if they get to the right information and they can action that information.
And I want to come back to what you said there about like you could take each of these risk factors, whether it's for dementia, whether it's for heart disease, things like cholesterol, hypertension. You could treat each individual symptom. Like you could take statins, you could take various drugs. But unless you look at what's caused that, I feel like they're symptoms of a lifestyle and the choices. And actually, if you go to the root and you fix those things, you're gonna tick all the boxes.
It's a foundation, right?
Yeah, because if you start getting active and eating well and looking after your diet, you're gonna improve your cholesterol. You're gonna improve your blood pressure. You're gonna improve depression. You're gonna improve all these things, but you're also actually going to be healthier.
Yeah, exercise is probably one of the. But I think exercise, even if you're overweight, I don't think when you're obese it does help. But even if you're overweight, exercise will help reduce your cholesterol. We've seen that in research. It will, and it will also help you with your HbA1c, which is a measure of how well you've kept your blood sugar for the last 3 months, 2 to 3 months.
Particularly strength training.
Yeah, strength training, cardiovascular training. It's all going to help, but. So if you take a statin, statins are good. Statins show that they decrease mortality in cardiovascular diseases because they've got not just have they got lipid lowering effects where they lower LDL and they lower lower LDL and some of them improve HDL, but they also have an anti-inflammatory effect as well.
Oh, and inflammation's related to
dementia. And
dementia,
inflammation is related,
well?
yeah, exactly. So they have that anti-inflammatory effect. However, it's only so many years and you're still going to be living in a very bad way. If you're overweight and you're obese and you're taking a statin, well, you're going to have other problems.
Actually, can we talk about that? Because these things tend to come together and actually there is a name for it, when you've got multiple of these symptoms, which is metabolic syndrome.
Yeah, metabolic syndrome, which is really interesting. Now, I was looking at, I've obviously looked at metabolic syndrome, but looking at the numbers of metabolic syndrome is staggering. So metabolic syndrome is characterized by high adipose obesity, so 40 inches for a man above.
Around your waist.
And 35 inches for a woman.
And this is why because even on the NHS website after, and we've got it on our calorie quiz, after people do their BMI, because a lot of people don't like to do that, the next part underneath it and on the NHS website is take your height to waist ratio.
Yes, and I think that's very important because you can be a normal BMI and have high adipose fat, and your risk factors then start to go back up.
Or you could even be a slightly over BMI. If you don't like BMI, you could be a 26, 27, but you could, if you've done the height to waist ratio, that would be another good indicator to see if you're carrying too much sort of belly fat.
That's a very good way. I think height to waist, absolutely important. And so that's one of them. Then you've got elevated triglycerides, which are a type of blood fat. Mostly, if you eat too many calories, you're going to have elevated triglycerides, which then displaces the LDL cholesterol. So triglycerides,
good cholesterol.
Yeah. What will happen is triglycerides they're not soluble. They can't transport in by themselves in the blood because they can't get into the transport in an aqueous environment. So they kick out the triglycerides, or kick out the LDL cholesterol in the LDL particle, and then the triglyceride will go into the LDL particle and then travel to where it needs to get into the blood. That forces the liver to make more LDL so it can transport the normal cholesterol around. It's called the cholesterol discordance, and that's a big problem. So elevated triglycerides, low HDL also. So going back, so just to review, big waist, high triglycerides, low HDL, hypertension is metabolic syndrome. If you've got that, you've got metabolic syndrome.
So that's high blood pressure.
High blood pressure is hypertension.
And you have to have all of those things for it to be considered that you have metabolic syndrome.
Yes, or I think maybe actually if you had, I think it's either 4 out of the 5, you're more likely to have it. But yeah, I think maybe if you've got the whole 5, then you are you've got metabolic syndrome.
And realistically, if we look at clients that come in, it is common to hear them say, well, the doctor said, I've got this and I've got this and I've got this. They don't actually necessarily say I've got metabolic syndrome, which is interesting. But it's really common that they come as a pack.
Yeah.
And that's where we're saying, for me, it's a symptom of things that are going on rather than, oh, you just happen to have these 5 separate things. That's not what's happened, is
But
it?
if they've been now characterised as this metabolic syndrome, and the numbers are staggering. I was saying to both you guys that 1 in 3 Americans have metabolic syndrome. 1 in 3. And I think that's about 80 million people in the United States of America. 1 in 4 have it in the United Kingdom. That's 18 million people. They've got this huge syndrome, well, not huge syndrome, this syndrome that's connected to a huge amount of diseases. And they're walking around willfully ignorant. As you know, I don't like people being willfully ignorant. So they've been told that this is an issue. People know that high cholesterol is bad for them. People know that obesity and being overweight is bad for them. And they're walking around not doing nothing about it.
I think it is. I think people know, but I don't think people necessarily know what to do to fix the solution.
As well. I think it's like a theoretical bad. Like being overweight and your knees hurting, you feel it every day. Having high cholesterol, it's like, yeah, okay, I've got high cholesterol. Can't really tell. It's like a problem for future me, like I said at the beginning of the episode, that you feel like you can kind of ignore it for now because there's no direct impact on your life.
Issues with it,
But it's just storing up those issues, isn't it?
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you've told that you've got cardiovascular disease. And you've got
heart attack
yeah.
or something. And then it's like often, the issue then is it's often too late, isn't it? Like you've done the irreversible damage, which is... Yeah, I mean, if you kind of look at the crux of it, like we said earlier, like, people will go in and get this statin or get this pill or get something else and won't deal with the root cause of it. But I think fundamentally that's just like that's a human psychology and behavior. You know what I mean? Like, if this is when you look at the, the meditation industry is worth like, I don't even know, like, a couple of hundred, sort of like a million, like 100 million.
Medication or meditation?
Meditation.
Oh.
Meditation, yeah, it may be bigger as well, but when you look at like the anti-anxiety medication market on top of it, it's like 10x more. Yeah. And you just see that's because it's much easier to take a pill for your anxiety than it is to do 10 minutes of meditation every day. So it's the same with what you're saying, and I think this is also just tied into like the massive explosion of the GLP-1s and Ozempic and semaglutide, because the company in Europe is now the biggest company, Novo Nordisk, to have come out of Europe ever. I think they're doing like 680 billion. Top of customers are obviously America. But again, it's much easier to sell someone a solution of take this injection and you will suppress your appetite and lose weight because you'll eat less. But then you're seeing people who are becoming, it was Peter Attia done tests on them, and they said they were, because people went strength training, they were losing more muscle as they were losing weight. So they were becoming fatter on a percentage.
You've got to keep as you lose weight. You have to keep your relative muscle mass.
Yeah.
Your relative muscle mass must increase as your weight drops.
But people aren't doing that. They're getting given this drug saying, take this and you'll lose weight. And like, of course, they're not going to the gym. You know what I mean? Or like a very small percentage of these people will.
So I want to make my position clear on GLP-1. I think for people that are morbidly obese and obese, that have got to a pattern where I think GLP-1 is actually quite a good thing for them, because their feedback loops are all messed. They can't control their hunger at this point. They're really they're really finding it hard. That's my position. However, we do see that people still, even when they're obese and morbidly obese, they can lose weight without the GLP-1. But it also, I love, and as well, I like the fact that GLP-1 came out, because this is what happens, right? I've talked to loads of people that are obese, and say, my metabolism's messed up. I've got a poor thyroid function. I'm big boned. I can't lose weight. I've tried all these diets. And then GLP-1s come out, and so they don't believe that eating food is causing them to be obese. They've just got this metabolism problem. A lot of people will, like the BMI, they'll ignore it. Oh, no, it's not me that it's not because I'm eating too much. It's because I can't lose weight because of my thyroid. And then they get given a GLP-1 drug and they lose weight because they've stopped eating. So it works. So wait, it's not your metabolism, it's not your thyroid, it's the fact that you was actually overeating all this time and that you didn't stop eating.
But then people will still find a way to hang it on the fact that no, the medication changed the way my body was processing the food.
It doesn't. Again, that's just it just stops you from eating. That's the point. It will reduce your appetite.
Yeah.
And it stops you from
But
eating.
I mean, we've gone through this on like the podcast before, haven't we? But like an issue with this is like, it's the environment that is, that this is the reason why the overweight and obesity rates are just skyrocketing. It's the fact that we move less, we're not as active. There's more ultra-processed foods. It's like 80% of the UK person's diet now is ultra-processed foods, which are easy to overconsume, don't fill you as much on, are satiating, take less energy for your body to digest. We are seeing that. Like if you just gave someone like a completely whole foods diet, and like, let's say somebody is morbidly overweight and they try to eat 3,000 calories of purely whole foods,
it's going to be a whole lot
stuffed.
hot.
Yeah, it's going to be so hard.
They're going to be more satiated.
Yeah, like a natural GLP-1 is eat whole foods, lots of fiber, lots of protein, lots of water, and you would struggle. Like, you ever see anyone who eats a steak and then can eat a second steak straight afterwards?
I can. I just stop myself. Yeah.
Actually, I think that's a really nice point for us to say. Like, we've talked a lot about the scariness and all the bad things, but like, what can people do? Because a lot of this, yes, you've got genetic predisposition, but a lot of this is in your control.
Can I ask a question first? I want to ask you guys a question at Body Smart, because with what you guys are doing, and this is directly related to what we were just talking about, the GLP-1. Right, so you guys are experts in women's weight loss, and you're very successful. You've got over 1,000 reviews on Trustpilot. You've got great coaches. You've got a lot of clients that are very, very happy. What do you think is the key to your clients' success in that weight loss?
Well, thank you for the good advertisement
there.
We cut through the bullshit, which is very much our hashtag, cut the BS. We dial back the noise. There's, like you said, there's a lot of misinformation, and we just focus on the basics, simplify it, and hold people accountable. And that can sound like overly simplistic, but we'll speak to a person and understand what their biggest struggles are, and then we will just put some of the basics in place, like get them walking and moving a little bit more, getting them just making small changes with the diet. Nothing like, we're not going from like, this is how you could eat now, and then we're going to go completely 180 on your diet. We'll start to make small, consistent changes, and we just do that consistently every day, every week, every month for a long period of time. And over that time, the change doesn't feel, people don't resist the change as much because it's small, it's happening small and consistently, and they're seeing results. So that gives them evidence to say, hey, what I'm doing is working. So that, again, the behavior is more like, oh, I'm seeing results and this isn't that hard. I should keep doing this. And you're held accountable, and you're seeing other people in the community also get the results who are 10 steps ahead, 20 steps ahead, or maybe 5 steps back. And that becomes reassuring that you can see that there's a pathway to success. And then, we very much, it's off, James Clear, if you get 1% better every day over the course of the year, you get 37 times better. So that's it. But a lot of our clients are perfectionists, and all often they want to go to the gym 5 times a week and want to go on 800 calories. Like, that's what they've done in the past. So for us, when we're going, oh, actually, your calorie deficit's 1,500 calories and we're getting 100 grams of protein, I'm like, and then we're increasing food volume, and
Yeah,
they're like,
I don't
feel hungry, and this is like, I'm normally starving, and like, oh, I'm going to the gym twice a week, and I've only increased my steps by 2,000. I'm in the same results, and it's that we get actually friction sometimes from clients that they're seeing results, and it's not as hard as they are used to it being.
They want to be doing more.
Yeah.
And we have to rein them in.
That's why it's failed in the past, because you've tried to go 100 mile an hour, you do it for 2 weeks, and then you just give up and go back to your old habits and behaviours.
But I do think as well, it's that a lot of the things, well, all of the things that we're asking clients to do genuinely make their lives better. Like, they sleep better, they have more energy, they feel stronger when they try and pick something up. Like, there's just all these benefits that once they start feeling them, why would you not keep doing that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it takes doing it the right way to get those benefits. I think where so many of these women before have tried to lose weight, but they've just tried to lose weight. They haven't tried to make their life better or their life healthier. And so it's how we go about it really that makes a difference. And that's why it also leads to these improvements in health markers, because we're actually taking the actions that are going to make you healthier.
Absolutely. So I think one of the ways that so a couple of points on that. One of the ways that I enjoy to help people make weight loss changes is I will gradually reduce calories. I won't just do, lots of people will go, I want to go 800 calories today from whatever they've been eating. They might be eating 2,600 calories and they go to 800 and they can feel that huge. And that's why they'll yo-yo and come back up. So I just incrementally decrease the calories and make sure that the weight loss is coming off and it's the right proportion of weight loss. So if it's too much muscle mass, I'll go back up. And I'll just say that's where you are. That's how much weight you're going to lose, and we're not losing too much muscle mass. As long as the relative muscle mass is going up compared to the body weight.
Yeah.
So you can lose muscle mass. You're gonna every weight loss program ever is going to have a proportion of muscle mass in a weight loss program, right? But you're going to be losing more fat mass, and then that's going to change the relative muscle mass change, right? So
like a lot of the women we'll coach as well maybe have done resistance training or haven't in the past, but because they'll start doing resistance training and they can get like newbie gains, or they've done training in the past, but then they're following a proper structured program and following progressive overload. You do see that, like
you might see
they might actually gain a little bit of muscle as well, which is perfect. That's exactly what you want when you lose weight. You want to maximize fat loss. You want to be able to maintain as much muscle or gain.
But I think the key thing is to keep that relative muscle mass high to the body weight. For me, anyway, that's what I like to see. So I will incrementally decrease the calories. I'll get to the point where there's a maintenance weight loss calories. It might be 1,500. It might be lower. It might be higher. And then once they get to the point where they've lost weight and they've lost the amount of weight that they want, I'll incrementally increase the calories very slowly to the point where I start to then see no weight loss or even weight gain, and then I'll go underneath that to keep them maintained. And it sounds like them small changes that you guys make is very similar to kind of that process, that you're increasing, you're decreasing calories, but you're increasing food volume, which is important. So eating more food with less calories in it is obviously going to satiate anybody. And I like that. That's pretty much the way I think weight loss should work.
Yeah, and it's also learning all this stuff feels a lot when you've been listening to every diet under the sun being sold to you for decades, and it's, oh, I should be keto, oh, I should be vegan, oh, I should be this. And actually we're like, just eat food, just eat real food, plenty of protein, plenty of fiber.
Yeah, fiber, protein, yeah.
And it sounds too simple because it's not this special protocol and it's not like demonizing anything. Yeah, we say to people, don't just feel like you can have chocolate. Please have chocolate, because you're more likely to stick with this if you feel like I can just have what I want. Yeah. And so I think that's also part of the struggle. We were saying earlier about tackling obesity. If you have a challenge with your weight, it feels like this big overwhelming thing, because it feels like you have to go to the other end of the spectrum.
But you don't.
Like you have to do it all, and you really don't.
Or you do, but you just take some time to get to that.
Yeah, you take the small steps to get there. So like when you look back over 2 or 3 years, you're fundamentally a different person. But that's not where we start, and I think that's what completely overwhelms people. If you've got 50 pounds to lose, you're like, that's such a long way to go. But we'll break it down and be like, hey, we're just going to focus on the next 4 weeks and focus on losing 4 pounds. And then when you lose that 4 pounds, you've now got 46 to go. I'm in the next 4 and the next 4. And it just makes the goal, like, it's in sight, it's achievable. You've got a clear plan on how to get there. I mean, it's just tackling that bigger goal in small bite-sized chunks. But yeah, it's very much the psychology and the behavior and understanding people and keeping them accountable. And I would say a lot of people as well, if they've struggled with the weight for a long period of time, that's just become part of their identity to an extent as well, because that's all the evidence they've got says, I can't do this. So getting people back into that idea of I can keep my promises to myself, I can do this, I have evidence to say I can show up for my workouts and lose weight and be successful. And that really starts to change people's beliefs of becoming the version of them that they need to, which is that fit and healthy person. And
it's having the tools and the support to do that as well, because it's easy to say, oh, just eat more fiber, or just eat more voluminous foods. But actually, you need somebody there with you to say, oh, I saw you ate this today. Like, next time, try this slightly different version. You're
just changing behaviours in a big way. It's just the changing of them behaviours is so fundamental.
Yeah.
Going back to your question that led down to that thing, what was
oh God, now you're asking me. I think it was more about the point of like, we've got all these elements of metabolic syndrome,
Yeah.
what are the things that people should be doing? And you were saying earlier about preventative.
Yeah.
What should we be doing and when?
Yeah, so this is the important point. So again, one of my biggest gripes nowadays is people taking supplements or medications and not doing the basics like losing weight, eating healthy diet, and getting into a good exercise pattern. I think that's the fundamental things that you have to do before you can start thinking about whether resveratrol or whatever supplement that you've heard is going to work to help decrease the risk of something or increase your longevity. You have to be able to get them fundamentals right first, so you can. That is the biggest risk reductions that you're going to ever have on anything. No supplement at the moment can compare to the risk reduction of an obese person getting into a normal healthy weight range and increasing their activity patterns. Supplements may help to a degree. The problem is so we know, for example, this is good. We know calorie restriction probably does have a longevity benefit. And it's very, very hard to get these studies for calorie restriction. So David Sinclair is a Harvard professor that does all this anti-aging work in like calorie restriction, all that kind of stuff. And then you've got people like Brian Johnson who take 50 supplements a day and eat 1,950 calories and spends £4 million or whatever it is in trying to increase his lifespan. And relatively, I do think calorie restriction probably does work, but the studies with calorie restriction are very, very problematic because it's very hard to get humans to eat the calorie restriction, although saying that the calorie trials, which we'll talk about in a minute, very hard to get humans to eat a certain amount of calories for a long enough period so you can see that direct benefit so if I've got 5,000 humans, I'll put 2,500 on a normal diet, say don't do nothing different, I'm just going to use you as a control group, and then have the other 2,500, I'm going to follow you for 25 years, don't ever go over 1,800 calories per day.
Good luck.
Yeah.
It's a very, very tough to get people to do that. The dropout rate's going to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
The researcher that's doing it, he's got to wait a long, long time, but a good proportion of his academic career. He's not going to want to do that. But you do see these in model organisms, so mice, monkeys, other model organisms. You see calorie restriction time and time again has shown to work to extend their lives. But then there was one research paper that I know of that followed rhesus monkeys for 23 years, and they found no evidence of calorie restriction offering a longevity benefit. But on the whole, in animal models, you do see calorie restriction is significant in adding.
And is that calorie restriction versus overconsumption or versus maintenance?
It would be maintenance.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, maintenance. Mostly maintenance, probably overconsumption in some of them. Now, what you have in what we do have is a lot of observational data, like the Okinawa centenarian study. So we know like Okinawa is an island off of Japan.
It's one of the blue zones.
It's one of the blue zones, exactly. And the average intake for the residents there is 1,800 calories. That's how much they eat. Sweet potato is the main staple of their diet. Other vegetables, some seafood sometimes, some fish, some seafood sometimes, no meat really. And we see, and there's plenty of other blue zones and plenty of us data that we can get from observational studies that lend power to the idea that calorie restriction probably works for longevity, right? So yes, it does work. Another one is vegetarian studies.
Would that also be though, like if somebody's maintaining their weight on 1,800 calories, this has not come back to the point we were saying a bit earlier that the little old lady, the little old man, if you're maintaining your weight on 1,800 calories,
you're a small person.
You're likely a small person, probably not that tall or not that heavy as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so sorry, what's the...
Oh, I'm just saying, like
you're just smaller.
You're just typically smaller,
yeah.
You know.
I definitely couldn't survive on that.
I mean, you could.
But
I would lose weight. 1,800 is
that's
my
what I mean.
weight
But
loss
then you
calories.
would lose weight until you stopped.
So the idea of
I'd be really skinny.
the idea of how calorie restriction works is it activates genes that are associated with survival. Right. So you basically what you're doing is calorie restriction will activate these genes that will associate with survival. It will stop the body from the cells from dividing, It'll stop all that kind of stuff. And then that is kind of like how it works, how these so calorie restriction we know. So this is what David Sinclair studies. This the SIRT1 gene. If you have calorie restriction, the SIRT1 gene gets activated, and then that increases the expression of another gene called FOXO3, and then that helps DNA repair. But that is under calorie restriction, right? And DNA damage is one of the hallmarks of aging. So there's 7 hallmarks of aging. We'll talk about that in a bit, right? But so we know that calorie restriction will activate these genes that are meant for that help with survival, and there's other things that will do that though. So cold therapy has been shown to activate some of them genes. Exercise activates some of them genes. So this is why you're getting that association with
saunas as well.
Saunas can activate
heat shock proteins.
Yeah, so heat shock proteins. So you can activate these survival genes quite easily, and you don't need to be in calorie restriction. So one of the things, and I do think it probably works, but again, the data is so hard to come by. It's obviously everyone's heard of intermittent fasting, I should imagine, in this room, right? I do probably think it works, but again, the data is so hard to come by because of the problem in getting humans to commit to a diet and following that diet for a long time, right? Intermittent fasting, if you drop your calories, probably activates some of them survival circuits, survival genes, and you probably can get the benefit.
You don't
that
necessarily need to drop your calories, so can you? You could fast for 18 hours and still consume.
And then consume, and you're still going to activate them.
Mm.
That's the principle. You're exactly right, Jaymie. So you don't need to drop your calories for a period of time. So for 18 hours, you activate them things, and then you could consume the rest of the calories that you missed out on that 18 hours, and you're still likely to activate them. And that's what the studies have shown. But going back to there was this study called published in the Lancet journal, which is called the calorie trials, and it's the most comprehensive kind of data that we've got. And we can't really, so when it comes to restriction in calories or intermittent fasting, or even the vegetarian diets, and we know vegetarian diets offer protection of all-cause mortality as well. They do. So without a shadow of doubt.
Are you ready to lose 30 to 60 pounds in under 6 months without restrictive diets, countless hours exercising, or any guesswork? Well, we help women over 30 do exactly that. Lose weight guaranteed. And 5 to 10 pounds a month is the average weight loss. And that's not a cherry pick statistic, that is the average. Your weight loss results are 100% guaranteed, and you will lose unwanted body fat. So apply now at bodysmartfitness.com, but only if you're a woman over 30 and you want to lose 30 to 60 pounds in under 6 months.
So let's just get really clear on that. Like, what does a good eating pattern look like when it comes to health and longevity?
I think what you guys do is really, really good. I think if people cut out the ultra-processed foods, which are, like you said, far too easy. Just coming up to Liverpool yesterday, I went into the shop and I was running around like a madman. And I was hungry. I'd finished a training session. It was a few hours after the training session. I was getting really hungry. You know how you get hungry. And walked in, and my train was delayed, right? So they cancelled 2 trains actually. So I walked into the train station coffee shop, and it just didn't have nothing that I could eat there. Not a thing. It's so easy to eat ultra-processed foods. And the idea is that if you buy a donut from there, you eat that donut in 30 seconds, and that's 400 to 450, 500 calories.
That's a meal.
In that donut. That's nuts. And is that going to satiate you?
No,
it's not.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I think good food choices in terms of whole foods, lots of vegetables, bit of fruit, good amount of protein, and good fibrous carbohydrates. So high fiber carbs, not easy fiber, like not low fiber carbs, which again are not going to satiate you.
So we're talking the things like grains, lentils, pulses, sweet potato, all of those things, normal potatoes,
all them things are going to be fine to a degree, but mixed in with obviously decent amount of protein. Depends on your activity level. I mean, the most amount of protein you probably should have is 1.6 grams. I'm talking someone like Jaymie should be having that. I think most people do fine on 1.2 grams of protein per kg of body weight. I don't think there's...
Which I think it's important to point out that, especially with vegetarians and vegans, the lobby kind of organisations for those diets will say, oh no, the RDA is 0.8 grams. But actually, if you are active or you're trying to lose weight, that's not enough.
Well, if you're active you said it, like protein's a building block of muscle. So of course, I don't think 0.8 grams is going to be enough. I think 1.2, a little bit more. If you're active, probably build it up to about 1.6. I don't know if there's any more benefit than taking 1.6 grams per kg of body weight. I don't know.
They generally say anything over 2, there's no benefit.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I think yeah, maybe somewhere like if you're really, really active. Like I eat a lot of protein, but I'm training 10 to 12 hours a week, which is high. So I do 4 hours of running, 2 hours of resistance training, and then I do 6 hours of jiu-jitsu a week. So it's a high demand on my body, which leads me to I think right. So I'm 41 now, and I've really noticed a drop off in my recovery. Right. So and this is the thing. So for men, we don't get the option. So if I went to the doctor and I said to the doctor, listen, I'm feeling a bit, and I have felt this way. I'm feeling a bit low in energy. My recovery is not as good, and my drive for work, my ambition for work has gone down hugely, right? And he'll say, well, it's just a part of life. You're a bit low in testosterone, and I won't be offered on the NHS TRT, so testosterone replacement therapy, which I think as well is important, nearly as important for men as it is for women. So we don't get that option where women feel bad going through the menopause, they'll be offered HRT. If a man starts to have a drop off in testosterone, they're not offered this in the NHS in the UK. You have to go private, which I have. I've gone private. I'll make sure that my testosterone level stays around about 28 to 32, no more than that, because after anything more than that, it's really not very good for you. So I think so. Just as a kind of like a shout out, if you're getting older, like getting past past a certain age, there's no issues for men to take hormone replacement therapy either.
It's male menopause, isn't it? Which I think can kick in. Well, it's kicking in sooner now for men than for a whole host of different reasons.
Yeah.
A lot of people have said like, oh, it's the plastics in the water and it's the amount of estrogen in the water because people on the pill. Probably one of the biggest things that it is that people are just more overweight.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. And stress,
Stress,
as
not sleeping properly, not eating properly.
Stress and not not sleeping is definitely going to be huge impactors on. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. I know we're not here to talk about.
Yeah.
Mehat.
Well, for all the women listening, they've got men in their lives as well. And if you've noticed, just like the way you will go through menopause, a guy will go through. It's not off a cliff edge as much as it might seem for women, but it can be a slow decline over years and decades for some guys.
It's very dangerous if you take. So we're going back to the point of the kind of obesity paradox and what we see between someone that's just got a normal a high amount of muscle mass that's slightly overweight is probably going to have protective effects against different diseases later on in life. But bodybuilders will have too much muscle mass that impacts their cardiovascular health, and that causes overall higher mortality. I think it's very important to make sure that if you do TRT, that you go and see a professional and make sure that you're doing it correctly. Don't let your levels go over maybe 29, 32, 28, 32. I think that's a good range for men to be in. Just as a kind of shout, don't get it from your gym buddy.
It's all too common.
Yeah, which is very common, and it can be very, very dangerous. But yeah, so the diet, in terms of going back to the diet, I think what you guys do is perfect. I think good whole foods, lots of vegetables, lots of fibrous carbohydrates, a good amount of protein, a couple of pieces of fruit, and you are doing well with that. I think in terms of physical activity, so obviously the recommended minutes is 150 minutes of
a week,
activity per week, right? Or 75 of moderate activity, or 75 minutes of intense activity. I actually think you combine them, and I'll tell you why.
What, do both?
Yeah. So you got physical activity is definitely associated with lower all-cause mortality and lower dementia risk, right? So the more physical activity that you do, the lower the risk, right? But another metric called VO2 max, which is the maximum amount of oxygen you uptake and utilise in your body, is actually a far better predictor of longevity than physical activity. So if you're doing 75 intense minutes per week, you'll actually increase your VO2 max, which is a really, really, really strong predictor of longevity, and the physical activity to that just adds to the overall risk reduction. So I think maybe if you want, do a little bit of intense activity alongside just normal physical activity levels per week.
Especially if you're not very active though at the moment, saying do 150 minutes and 75 minutes
Well, I
is a
think
lot.
that's-
So is there a preference
I
which
think
one has more benefit?
I'd say, for me, I would say probably do a 75 intense, even if you're just starting.
Not in one go, though.
Not in one go, no. But
Just
also,
make that clear.
what you guys do is you don't just start somebody out on week one and just hammer them. You do incremental changes each week to add to that, like you say, 1% better each day. So it's not such a shock to them.
Yeah.
So you keep them, so you keep the person actually on the program.
Yeah.
Rather than
And
just
so we might
beasting
do
them.
like 3 half-an-hour intense workouts, which would be that 90 minutes
Yeah.
over the week.
Yeah.
And then encourage walking.
Yeah, that would be
So that's
great.
to find the balance, yeah. And we wouldn't say, I think, again, coming back to that idea of it's so overwhelming, people think I've got to be in the gym for an hour for it to count, and it's got to be 5 times a week.
Yeah, again,
But
you
actually,
don't.
we get amazing results with half an hour, 3 times a week to start, don't we?
Not just do you get amazing results. I mean, even any activity, even if I know this sounds odd, but there's been studies that Dr. Mike Mosley shown on BBC that even just a couple of minutes of intense activity can be a really, really good thing for you. So you can, my preference would be, you do the 150 minutes. I think the 75-minute intense minutes, it broken down into a couple of sessions per week, is probably going to be a bit better for your health markers, and a stronger. It's going to help build your VO2 max, and it's going to be more time efficient. And then you just encourage more walking. Like stop walking 1 mile to the gym to doing, a treadmill run. It just makes no sense. Run that mile to the gym and then do a strength training exercise and then run back. And fit it all in. You don't need to do, people drive into the gym to run on the treadmill. It's just, to me, it just makes no sense. You could run to the gym, do your strength training, and then run back in the same amount of time.
Provided you live somewhere where it's safe to do that.
Very true.
Yeah. But yeah, I do think having some guidance on what to focus your energy and your time on is really helpful, because, as you said earlier, there is so much misinformation and conflicting information out there of what is necessary.
Yeah.
And it isn't as much as you think to have these protective benefits. And as we said earlier, anything is better than nothing.
Yeah.
So even if you just start with 1 workout a week and you're doing nothing, you're going to be getting those benefits. And then over time, you can build that up as you get fitter, as you start to see the benefits and you think, oh yeah, maybe I do feel better for this.
Which
I'll
I
do it a
think
bit
is
more.
important to hammer home, because if you're a chronic perfectionist or feel like you have to do it all, saying like, I can only work out once a week on a Monday, but that's, if you do that for the next 6 months, you're going to see way more benefits and results than 0.
Well, an interesting way to put it, actually, we had a post this week that I was looking at the comments yesterday, and it was something like, I don't know who needs to hear this, but 1 workout a week is better than no workouts a week.
Yeah, absolutely.
And somebody in the comments went, oh my God, that's just blown my mind, because that's 52 workouts this year, versus if I was waiting till I could do 3 workouts a week, I'd probably do none.
Yeah.
Which, and you put it like that, it's so logical, but we have these little voices in our head that are not logical.
No. I think physical activity is encompassing of all movements. Right, so that 150 minutes could be anything. It could be running around a pitch playing football. It could be walking. It's all physical movements. That's what physical activity means. It don't just mean getting to the gym, right? I think that's what people need. I do believe that we're less active. Put it this way. When I was a child, and when most people were kids, your playing time and activity level is so much more. So senior school, secondary school, whatever you call it.
High school.
If you're in high school, I would, me personally, I walked to, I got bus fare from my mum, right? I'd keep the bus fare for lunch, and I'd walk to work. I'd walk to the school. I'd walk back home. I'd play out in break. I'd play out in lunch. I'd play out in second break. I'd then walk home, as I said. I'd then wait for dinner by playing out some more. In all, it's about 4 to 5 hours of activity levels. Then you go university or you go work, you get a car, you drive to work, you sit there all day, type in the computer, and then you drive home. So I'm really, really tired. That's really drained me, that work as today. Eat chips, watching Netflix.
Yep.
That's what it's not the metabolism that slows down. We've shown that.
It's you. You've slowed down.
Yeah, it's your habits that have slowed down. So you need to start rebuilding them habits. I was talking to I was messaging one of the doctors on that I know. He posted a post saying the health secretary is now trying to get people to walk and cycle more to work, because it's not just good for green. It's good for, it would save an X amount of NHS appointments.
Of course.
Yeah.
But the idea is so challenging, because if I say to my in-laws or somebody that's got an established set of behaviours, right, why don't you walk to town? It's only 3 miles away. It's mind blowing. What are you talking about? I'll drive, I'll park up, it's fine.
Yeah.
What else are you going to do? You know, just walk, start getting that physical activity again, and separate that from your, to me, it's just, that's what I like to do, separate that from your exercise regime. You should be highly active without having an exercise regime. And then you should be thinking, okay, now I need to start thinking about exercise.
Yeah. It's how you can build it into your day.
And you can build that in. You can build that. You don't need to do it straight away. You can say, well, I'm going to start being more active this week. And then you can build through it. And then you can start thinking about adding your exercise program. So I cycle everywhere. It's an e-bike. Might be considered cheating by some, but I still have to actively move. My heart rate will be between 90 and 110, depending if I'm on a hill. So that's actively moving. I will e-cycle everywhere. I will walk to the gym if I'm not cycling. I don't catch buses. I don't have a car. I don't drive. And I catch the train everywhere.
Yeah.
Because I can work at least.
Yeah. I think another thing that's really helpful is to just think of the pockets or windows of time that you already have.
Yeah.
Because what often surprises people is 10 minutes. We work on steps because that's something a lot of people can monitor. So a lot of people have a smartwatch and they'll have a goal and they can go, right, all right, I need to get 5,000 steps today. Yeah. 10,000 steps is a lot, but 1,000 steps is only about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And so if you can do 10 minutes after your breakfast, round the block, or 10 minutes on your lunch break, that you weren't doing before, actually, these little changes aren't going to feel like I'm overhauling my life and I've got to get active. But it can change your life.
It can change, and it can drastically add to your step count. But it goes to the idea of saying, like, people will spend an hour in the gym, they'll like I said, they'll drive there, they'll do 20, 30 minutes on the treadmill, and then they'll go or they'll do 20, 30 minutes doing strength exercise, and then they'll go on the treadmill later on, and then drive home. You could run, do your strength exercise and run back, and you saved that time. That's time saved. That's how it's
just, I think it's just looking at your lifestyle specifically and factoring it in. Like Steph, when she worked at the hospital, would park at the back of the car park, so she had to get there 10 minutes earlier than she would have. But then it was a 10-minute walk into the hospital. She'd do a 30-minute walk on a lunch, and it was a 10-minute walk back. So just off that, and then her work day, she'd done about 8,000 steps. If she ever went to shops on the way back, she always parks at the furthest point away in the car park. That's extra steps in and back out the shop. And like through the week, Monday to Friday, no issues at all, hitting 10, 11,000 steps. And then on the weekend, we'd consciously go for a walk. But that was just for her. As long as I get to work 10 minutes earlier, park in that point, I'm going to have to walk back to walk at lunch. And it was like, what if it's raining? She took an umbrella and a coat. You know, it's just, so you can just factor it in and that just become
absolutely
the norm. And then once you've done it for a long enough period of time, it doesn't feel like this is a friction to do that. It's just
your life.
And what you do.
And that adds to the overall physical activity, which I still think that should be separated from any type of exercise regime. I'm not saying that you should have started at once. I just think that people generally are lazier. They're more sedentary, they're not doing as much, and they could be utilising, as you said, these pockets of windows fitted around your lifestyle, as you said, that you could be increasing your physical activity.
Yeah.
It takes nothing to walk.
Yeah.
It's nothing. It's a walk. It's just walking.
And just to loop back to where we started today, obviously we were talking about future me problems, dementia being one of them. And all of these things, it's never too late to start and it's never too little to start.
No,
so they're going to help your health now. They're going to help if you've got a weight loss goal now. But every little 10-minute walk you take is like paying into that pension, isn't it?
That's exactly right, yeah. So the earlier you do it, the better, but any time in your life, and we actually can see this in model organisms as well. So if we age rest by, say, 12 months and we start the intervention, say the calorie restriction there, and get them calorie restricted normal body weight, we actually still see the protective effects compared to controlled. The control group, right? So you can see, and if that's 12 months in a rat, it might be about 30, 40 years in a human. So we can equivalent that to human years. So, and you obviously see that as well in observational studies in humans and other well-designed RCTs. So you actually do see that people starting at any point, even if you're 60, you're overweight, you're obese, you've got no activity levels, you're starting now doing some sort of physical activity and getting a handle of your diet so you can control your weight will help add to that fund, if you like.
Yeah. We've just, we had a post recently go viral, didn't we? A lady called Flo. She's like 99 running in the, and it's had like a couple of million reach on it. And she started, like, wasn't really physically active till her 60s. And she's like 99, flipping running sprints and doing
winning
hurdles.
records.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
it's just fantastic. And
It's inspiring, isn't it?
we've got so many women who have started in their 60s. I forget the lady's name. She'd done a testimonial and she was 69 and she was like, I'm going into my 70s and I feel like I'm going to have the best decade of my life, because she just felt like she'd built this foundation of health. And it's sad that it's taken that long to get to that point for her, but it's also amazing that she's like had that growth mindset. She's turning 70 and she's like, you know what, I feel fit, I feel strong, I feel healthy, I've got energy, and I'm going into, you know, the best decade of my life at 70, which is fantastic.
I like the post that you put up the other day, which was, I reshared that post, and it was that average American will spend X amount of years at work to be able, and then retire in taking X amount of drugs, spending X amount of money, and then living like with these disability, you know, disability adjusted life years, if you like. These, you know, they'll have diabetes, whatnot. So they're basically working to be able to fund their retirement in poor health.
Yeah.
Did you remember that one?
Yeah.
It's
I really like that, because that's very, very true. It's kind of like you work and then you retire. I think it's what, 67 now in this country, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, 67. So you work, you retire at 67 years old. You're probably already in poor health before you retire, and then all you've got to look forward to is, you know, more doctor's visits.
But it doesn't
every
have to
day.
be that way.
It doesn't.
That is the takeaway from today's episode. That it doesn't have to be that way.
And it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of cultures around around the world that show, like I said, one of the Amazon tribes, they don't even have age-related blood pressure issues. They literally have low blood pressure in their elderly tribesmen and women, and that's kind of like we're like, as researchers, we're like, well, blood pressure is an age-related disease. It increases as you as you age, but it doesn't in these tribes. There's plenty of cultures around the world that have shown that you can do this.
I've got one thing to ask you before we sort of finish up, Calum, which is this is one of our pinned posts on our page, which is the average lifespan of an American woman is 79, which means midlife is 39. What would you say to somebody that is at that point?
I'd say they need to assess, at that point, midlife, they probably need to assess their weight, their diet, and their physical activity levels, and get them all structured so it adds to a preventative benefit later on in life. That's the biggest takeaway from this podcast. I know it's boring. It seems boring. It's not sexy. It's not you know, anything like dinitrophenol, which is, I don't know if you ever heard about dinitrophenol. It was something that was given in the 1930s that helped people lose weight like that. And then they found out it had all these bad side effects.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's not sexy. It's not easy. It seems boring, but getting the eating under control, getting a really good dietary pattern, getting your activity level sorted, getting yourself to the right BMI, irrespective. I know you might not believe BMI means anything, but it really, really does to most people, to most of us. And then that is going to have the protective effects. And then anything that you do additional to that, like your supplements, like your medications, that's just going to add to the benefit. Mm-hmm. But you can't just do the supplements and the medications and not have them three things sorted. I think by the time they get to your midlife, if you're healthy, and some people are, then great.
That have an audit then would be your advice.
Very good. I like that.
A midlife audit.
A midlife audit. Yeah.
Like it.
My midlife's going to be 50. I've decided. I'm very biased with this one. Midlife for me is going to be 50 years old.
Nice.
I'm 41, because if you're technically going on what you're saying is I'm in my midlife right now. I don't like that. I'm 50 years old, and I'll probably move it when I'm 50.
Create your own destiny.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that. Sorry, just to finish. I do think there is some really, really good evidence on longevity and how to actually use things like calorie restriction and other methods such as cold therapy and all that kind of stuff that will help increase life and health span. However, I think the problem is people are reading these books like from people like David Sinclair, they're following these people like Brian Johnson, and they're just not, they're thinking that the supplement is going to help them that they're taking, or the medication like rapamycin or metformin is going to help them. It's not. It's, you need to, if you're overweight and obese and you've not got your diet sorted and you're not exercising, then no supplement or medication is going to help you. So I'd love to talk about the longevity. We didn't actually do that. Like the hallmarks of aging.
We'll have to get you back on.
Yeah, so like the hallmarks of aging, I can include things like DNA damage and how that affects. So you have 7 hallmarks of aging: DNA damage, telomere attrition, cellular senescence, dysregulation of nutrient timing, so on and so on, and epigenetic information loss, which is central to what, and I really like David Sinclair's work. It's central to what he says. He says the aging is basically, the master point of aging, the combined theory of aging is the loss of epigenetic information. And epigenetics is just the way that we control gene expression. So, but we can
Stay
talk about
posted
that.
for a future episode. Thank you so much for coming down, Calum.
Thanks, Calum.
Wow, Calum is such a mine of information when it comes to everything health related, and he gets so passionate about helping people take those preventative steps. So if you found you really enjoyed getting into the nitty-gritty of health and how you can take control of it, then we have actually got another episode with Calum. So that's episode number 75. Definitely worth going and having a listen if you want to hear about